In a crowded courtroom, where every move was recorded by TV cameras, a federal judge allowed himself to laugh right in the face of one of the most famous figures of our time, Elon Musk. But they forgot one thing: Musk never plays by other people's rules. What happened next turned not only this case around, but also the whole idea of the power and influence of one person. The grand marble steps of the San Francisco federal courthouse loomed like an ancient Colosseum, the site chosen for a case that would soon reverberate through boardrooms, living rooms, and news feeds across the globe. Under the unblinking gaze of hundreds of cameras, both from major international networks and countless social media feeds, Elon Musk, the enigmatic and controversial CEO, known for his revolutionary ventures and unorthodox style, strode into the courtroom with an air of determined inevitability. This was no ordinary court appearance. Today he faced the scandalous funding secured case, a legal battle that had already cost him a measure of credibility among investors and critics alike, threatening to redefine the boundaries of corporate responsibility as well as the very essence of his entrepreneurial legacy. Musk's career had always been a cavalcade of bold risks and visionary projects, from launching rockets into space to pioneering electric vehicles. However, as his ambitions soared, so did the controversy. The funding secured claim, a statement that had once served as a rallying cry for his supporters, had instead become a flashpoint, exposing fissures in the trust between him and the capital markets. Allegations of misrepresentation and negligent oversight by his top executives swirling around the claim had forced federal authorities to dig deeper into the financial underpinnings of his ventures. In many eyes, the case symbolized not just a potential legal defeat, but an existential threat to the myth of invincibility that Musk had so meticulously cultivated over decades. As he entered the courtroom, every detail of Musk's presence was scrutinized with a mix of fascination and disdain. The room, an austere, high-ceilinged hall with polished wood panels and imposing portraits of judges past, was packed with attorneys, reporters, and onlookers, all waiting for the drama to unfold. Flashes from cameras lit up the polished marble floor like sparks in the night, capturing every step Musk took. Dressed in a finely tailored suit, a stark contrast to his eccentric public persona, he walked with a measured stride, his face an inscrutable mask of resolve. But beneath that stoic exterior, the weight of the moment pressed on him. He knew that the outcome of this courtroom battle could reshape his fortunes as decisively as any groundbreaking innovation he had ever pioneered. After the formalities were completed and the courtroom settled into an expectant silence, the proceedings began in earnest. The prosecutor's arguments, laced with allegations and pointed questions, had already cast a pall over the atmosphere, their words hinting at high-level corporate negligence. Then it was Musk's turn. Driven by a blend of desperation and defiant pride, he rose to deliver his initial defense. His voice, resonant and authoritative, filled the courtroom as he began to assert his case. With carefully chosen words, he recounted the many risks taken on behalf of his visionary enterprises, arguing that entrepreneurial innovation by its very nature involves uncertainties and bold promises. He maintained that his statement about funding secured was merely an expression of strong intentions, a commitment to push through, even in the face of unpredictability. Yet, as Musk mounted his defense, an unexpected and humiliating moment shattered the charged air. Mid-sentence, as he tried to articulate the essential logic behind his actions, Judge Edward Chen, known in certain circles for his no-nonsense demeanor, let out a hoarse, dismissive laugh that ricocheted off the courtroom walls. The sound was startlingly incongruent with the gravity of the accusations at hand. Judge Chen's laughter was not a privately suppressed reaction. It rang out openly, a public display that seemed to belittle every carefully constructed sentence Musk had spoken. The hall fell into a stunned, incredulous silence. Conversations abruptly ceased, eyes widened in collective disbelief, and cameras captured every angle of this judicial outburst. Judge Chen's expression, hidden behind a veil of grim formality that faltered for just a fraction of a moment, conveyed scorn as he quipped a cutting remark about ventures driven by fantasies rather than hard numbers. His mockery, delivered with a cold precision that left no room for ambiguity, reduced Musk's arguments to mere echoing pretensions under the weight of legal scrutiny. The laughter in the courtroom was infectious. In its shock, it spread like wildfire through the media, and within minutes news outlets around the world began broadcasting the moment. Social media exploded with clips and live streams of the incident, and what was meant to be a solemn proceeding turned into an instantaneous spectacle of humiliation for one of the world's most high-profile entrepreneurs. In that excruciating moment, the cameras captured not only the naked derision of Judge Chen, but also the subtle shift in Musk's demeanor. Gone was the unyielding confidence of a man who had, until now, been untouchable in his domain. In its place, a fleeting but undeniable hint of vulnerability emerged, a flicker in his eyes, a brief tightening of his jaw, and a momentary pause that spoke volumes about the personal cost of his ambition. The courtroom, filled with the hushed murmurs of those present, became the stage for an unfolding drama of public humiliation and personal reckoning, a scene that would soon force Musk to confront not just the legal challenges before him, but also the internal fractures that had long been the unspoken price of his success. This public derision, immortalized by every lens and broadcasted to countless viewers worldwide, marked the turning point, a moment when the world began to see not just the unassailable titan of industry, but a human being vulnerable to pain, shame, and ultimately redemption. It was a reminder that even those who seem infallible may one day be brought low, and that true strength does not lie in avoiding humiliation, but in rising once the fall has come. Within hours of Judge Chen's derisive outburst in the San Francisco courtroom, the world's digital pulse began to quicken with equally swift and unforgiving judgment. Viral videos of the incident exploded onto the internet, short clips looping Judge Chen's mocking laughter, intercut with Musk's carefully measured defense now tinged with a barely concealed falter. Social media platforms lit up with a tempest of memes, hashtags, and biting commentary. Headlines screamed of the humbling of a titan, and when funding secured turns into humiliation secured, while pundits and satirists alike dissected every nuance of Musk's now public persona. News outlets ran endless segments featuring split-screen comparisons of Musk's confident facade in boardrooms versus his vulnerable moment on the stand. The digital world, which had hitherto revered him as an unstoppable visionary, now reveled in his moment of exposed fallibility. In quiet contrast to the uproar on the public stage, Elon Musk retreated that very night to the sanctum of his high-rise executive office, a room whose panoramic windows offered a sprawling view of the glittering Bay Area. The office, typically a temple of power with its sleek modern design, now felt overwhelmingly cavernous and isolating. Almost every surface brimmed with tangible reminders of the empire he had built, gleaming trophies of innovation, certificates of milestones, long celebrated, and photos capturing his once unassailable triumphs. Yet on this night, the ambient glow of congratulatory memories seemed to mock him rather than comfort. Alone in his solitude, Musk sat at a polished obsidian desk, the quiet punctuated only by the soft hum of his computer and the distant murmur of a city that never entirely ceased its restless activity. On multiple screens arranged before him, the cascade of news articles, live feeds, and social media updates played out like a relentless barrage. Tweets filled with scathing humor and animated gifs of courtroom antics scrolled by in a never-ending loop. Every update bore witness to his public humiliation. The snide captions, the comparisons to fallen heroes, the bitter jests about a mighty empire crumbling in slow motion. It was as if every pixel on the internet had conspired to tear down the towering figure he had so meticulously constructed over decades. In that stark, artificial light, as the chill of midnight seeped through the glass walls of his office, Musk's internal monologue became an arena for unfiltered introspection. In a voice that was at once both resolute and pained, he questioned the very pillars upon which his identity had been built. I built my empire on ambition and bold promises. I pushed boundaries that others feared to cross. But now, in this moment, I am not just facing legal challenge. I'm facing the shame of being shown up in front of the entire world. Is this how legacy is measured? By a courtroom farce, captured on camera. I've spent years proving my mettle, yet here I am, humiliated by laughter and scorn. Framing these thoughts were memories that surged unbidden from a more personal past, a time when the drive to succeed had been fueled by sincere, if naive, hope. He recalled the long nights spent working side by side with teams that believed in his vision, the exhilaration of a breakthrough rocket launch, the heartfelt admiration of investors entrusting him with their dreams. But he also recalled the sacrifices, estranged relationships, missed family moments, and the gradual numbness that had come from prioritizing deals over dinners, profit margins over personal connections. As the digital storm outside continued unabated, Musk's eyes drifted to a framed photo on his desk, a rare image of him, with his daughter, both smiling in a moment of unguarded happiness before time and ambition had driven them apart. The photograph, an almost forbidden reminder of love and vulnerability, reinforced a painful truth: no sum of wealth or bulletproof strategy could fill the void left by alienation. In that reflective stillness, anger and sorrow intermingled with a dawning realization. The incessant stream of jeering headlines and viral clips had exposed a rawness he had long suppressed. He wondered, with a mixture of bitterness and introspection, whether the conventional path of appealing legal decisions and mounting a standard defense was truly the way forward. Every argument in the courtroom, every sarcastic remark by Judge Chen, had left him to confront the painful chasm between public perception and the man he truly was. There, amid the stark modernity of his office and the incessant buzz of the digital age, Musk recognized a pivotal crossroads. The weight of public humiliation was not simply a liability, it was a catalyst. It stirred in him a realization that perhaps the path to redemption lay not in legal appeals and bitter retaliation, but in a bold, transformative response that could redefine accountability and responsibility for corporations. It was time to abstain from the familiar cycle of defending ego and reputation through endless litigation, and instead to embrace a risk that could recalibrate the balance of power, restore trust, and turn scorn into a legacy of social commitment. In that silent, solitary moment before dawn, as the screens filled with a relentless parade of condemnation and imitators, a new resolve began to form in Musk's mind. A resolve born not of anger but of the profound understanding that when the world writes you off, you have the opportunity to rewrite the rules entirely. In the sterile quiet of an off-site strategy session at one of SpaceX's sprawling glass-enclosed conference rooms, Elon Musk sat surrounded by a cadre of seasoned legal advisors, financial experts and trusted executives. The kerfuffle in the federal courtroom, where Judge Edward Chen's dismissive laughter had turned Musk's carefully planned defense into public mockery, still resonated like an echo in his mind. The advisors, their expressions a mixture of concern and pragmatic resolve, had convened early that morning to deliberate on the fallout and map out the next legal and strategic move. For many in the room, the standard channel was clear. File a swift appeal, preserve the narrative with a focused defensive strategy, and chalk up the incident as just one moment of judicial eccentricity. Yet the atmosphere was anything but conventional. During the long, tension-filled meeting, one legal consultant, Miss Abigail Winters, a steely attorney known for her incisive analyses and cool demeanor under fire, presented the typical playbook. "Mr. Musk," she began, her tone deliberate and measured, "the appeal route is your safest conventional option. If we appeal based on procedural error or prosecutorial overreach, we might be able to mitigate some of the reputational damage. This could help restore investor confidence in your leadership and the underlying promise of your ventures." As she and her team laid out a series of conventional legal maneuvers, a catalogue of objections, standard precedents, and well-worn arguments, Musk listened, his eyes fixed on the pristine whiteboard as they scribbled bullet points in neat clinical lines. But every word, every recommended motion, reverberated with an undercurrent of resignation. Musk's mind, already reeling from the public humiliation of having his vision reduced to a farcical skit by a judge's cruel laughter, began to churn in dissent. The script of repeated appeals and quiet legal battles felt all too familiar, a cycle of defending a legacy built on relentless ambition and high-risk innovation, with nothing truly transformative emerging at its end. In a moment of pause, Musk's inner voice broke through. He remembered the countless nights he had steered rockets into orbit, calculated trajectories that defied gravity, and bet the future on dreams that most deemed impossible. All those battles had never been won by retreating behind conventional strategies. They were conquered by taking risks that redefined the rules. And now, facing the prospect of another defensive cycle that would likely only spin his narrative into further ridicule, he felt a surge of defiant resolve welling within him, a conviction that perhaps this time, instead of appealing or parrying with usual legal tactics, he needed to embrace a radically unexpected approach. As minutes turned into a reflective silence, Musk excused himself and walked out of the conference room into the cavernous, echoing halls of an empty SpaceX facility late that night. The dim, ambient lighting of the industrial corridors, once a familiar backdrop to innovation and progress, now felt charged with the weight of his decision. He wandered past the gleaming surfaces of prototype rockets, the futuristic sculptures that symbolized audacious ambition, and the quiet hum of machinery that had always been the soundtrack to his relentless pursuit of progress. Yet as he walked alone in that vast, empty space, his mind was a battleground of conflicting voices, the safe, predictable counsel of his advisors versus the wild, unyielding call of his visionary spirit. He found himself pausing in front of a large window overlooking the vast and dark expanse of the launch pad. The silence of the night was punctuated only by his measured breathing and the faint echo of his footsteps. In that moment of solitude, the memories of the courtroom humiliation blended with a personal reckoning, the realization that no more traditional appeals, no more rehearsed legal defenses would ever recapture the human element missing from his public persona. He recalled the raw vulnerability exposed by the cameras, the public's shaming laughter, and the inescapable truth that his detractors had magnified his weaknesses for their own satirical gain. A swirling mix of anger, regret, and a daring new vision surged within him. He understood that if he continued down the old path, a route of endless appeals and meticulous legal maneuvering, he would only be seen as trying to outsmart a flawed system. Instead, he thought, why not transform this moment of public humiliation into an unprecedented pivot, a bold redefinition of corporate responsibility? It was then that a revolutionary idea began to crystallize in his mind, creating a profound compensation initiative that would not only address the grievances of aggrieved investors, but also set an entirely new standard for accountability in corporate America. Rather than defend himself against the insults of the courtroom, why not offer the world a redemptive alternative, one that rewarded trust and heralded a new era of transparency and social responsibility? He envisioned a multi-billion-dollar compensation fund that would serve as both direct restitution for investors and a symbolic act of leadership, a declaration that no corporation should be above moral and ethical responsibility. Even as the risks piled high, Musk recognized that his legacy had always been forged on the anvil of boldness. The old playbook was burning away in the light of this new possibility. He was ready to challenge not just the court's derision, but the very paradigm of corporate governance. Standing before that window, he made a silent promise to himself. The next move would be not just a legal maneuver, but a transformative act designed to reshape public perceptions and redefine success. As he turned away from the dark view of the launch pad, his steps were steadier, his heart pounding with the exciting fear of stepping into the unknown. Musk understood that embracing this risk might cost him further criticism, yet it also offered the chance to emerge as something far greater, a beacon of unexpected moral victory in a world that often equates arrogance with success. In that quiet, decisive moment, with the future uncertain but filled with transformative potential, Elon Musk resolved to seize this juncture. He would need to marshal his teams, rewire his public relations, and engage in negotiations with the SEC. But most of all, he would do something unprecedented: prepare a compensation fund that would stand as a testament to his willingness to be held accountable. A bold declaration that true strength often comes when you let them write you off and then reinvent your fate. After the crushing public humiliation in the courtroom, Elon Musk's mind whirled with a cocktail of anger, regret, and an emergent resolve to do something never before seen in corporate America. No longer content with mere legal appeals and polished retractions, he envisioned a gambit that would not only redeem his public image, but also redefine the very notion of corporate responsibility. In a private session held in the hushed pre-dawn hours at a high-security, glass-walled conference room at SpaceX headquarters, Musk convened with his top legal, financial, and strategic advisors to lay the groundwork for his radical proposal, a multi-billion-dollar compensation fund. The plan was audacious. Musk declared his intention to allocate $3 billion to directly compensate aggrieved investors, a sum meant to restore confidence and reward those who had placed their trust in his enterprises. More controversially, he proposed dedicating an additional $2 billion to work in tandem with the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) in restructuring corporate governance and financial transparency standards. This combined compensation initiative, totaling a staggering $5 billion, was set to become a cornerstone of Musk's new legacy, one built not solely on breakthrough technology, but on a reimagined commitment to accountability and ethical business practices. As the meeting unfolded, Musk stood at the head of the long, polished table before a sea of stunned faces. Legal advisors with decades of experience furrowed their brows at the sheer scale of the proposal. Financial analysts exchanged incredulous glances as they ran through rapid-fire calculations and risk assessments on their laptops. Charts and projections flickered on the conference room's screening system, detailed diagrams that illustrated how the fund would be structured, dispersed, and managed over the coming months and years. Despite the meticulous planning laid out before him, the atmosphere was thick with tension and uncertainty. Traditional wisdom called for a restrained, methodical appeal, a defense that would attempt to repackage the scandal with conventional legal maneuvers. Instead, in a moment of raw determination, Musk had decided to chart a completely new course. In the midst of the discussion, one voice broke through the chorus of concerns and technical jargon, a voice that had been a constant pillar of support in Musk's turbulent journey. Samantha Clark, known affectionately as Sam, a longtime confidant and trusted advisor who had been with Musk through many of his groundbreaking yet fiercely controversial projects, rose from her seat. With calm conviction, she addressed the gathered team. Elon, what you're proposing is not just a financial maneuver, it's a revolution in corporate responsibility. You aren't simply betting on an appeal or a public relations stroke. It's about rewriting the rules. This fund will send a clear message that innovation cannot come at the expense of accountability. Investors will see that you're willing to stand by your commitments and pay the price for your bold claims. More importantly, regulators and the public will witness that corporate power isn't above the law. Her words resonated deeply with Musk. In that brief moment, as Sam's steady gaze met his, he felt the heavy mantle of past missteps, the missed opportunities to show compassion, the bitterness of isolation from those he had once claimed to lead. Her encouragement reminded him that every groundbreaking achievement in his career had required not just brilliance, but the courage to face public skepticism and opposition. Here too lay his chance for transformation, the opportunity to convert personal pain into a meaningful, bold act of restitution. Musk's features, etched with the scars of countless boardroom battles and headline-grabbing controversies, momentarily softened as he replied in a measured, reflective tone. I've built my empire by taking risks that others wouldn't dare to imagine. Every orbital launch, every innovative breakthrough, came with its own set of challenges and doubts. This is no different. The humiliation we faced in the courtroom, it's a wake-up call. I've been so consumed by ambition and the relentless pursuit of progress that I lost sight of what truly matters. If we have to endure this storm of public ridicule, let it be the catalyst that propels us to reshape how business interacts with society. Musk's declaration hung in the air as he turned to the elaborate presentation on the wall. The slides detailed a series of steps, the immediate allocation of the fund, the formation of a dedicated oversight committee with representatives from independent financial watchdogs and the SEC, and a long-term strategic plan for reinforcing corporate ethics and transparency. His legal team looked skeptical, scribbling notes and raising questions about regulatory hurdles and the potential financial impact on his ventures. Yet, the boldness of the initiative was undeniable. Sam added quietly, "This is your moment to transform perceived weakness into an example for the entire world. Don't let conventionality trap you in another cycle of appeals and apologies. Lead with integrity if you're willing to risk it all to make things right. You'll change not just how investors see you, but how the public and lawmakers view corporate power." For many minutes, discussion flowed rapidly, a mingling of technical details, potential objections, and strategic projections, forward-looking conversations about creating a new blueprint for corporate governance filled the room, challenging every preconception about how high-powered companies should manage their public responsibilities. Legal experts debated the intricacies of SEC negotiations, while financial planners examined the viability of reallocating billions without jeopardizing vital operations. Yet at the heart of every argument was Musk's unwavering resolve, a raw and determined desire to turn a personal and public defeat into an unparalleled comeback. As the meeting drew to a close, the mood shifted from one of trepidation to a charged sense of purpose. The compensation fund was no longer just a reactionary measure. It had evolved into a visionary initiative that promised to set a precedent in the business world. Musk's eyes, alight with resolve and a hint of newfound vulnerability, met those of his advisors. Amid the cautious nods and tentative smiles, an unspoken truth became clear. This was a defining moment, one that would test the limits of his innovation, challenge the status quo of corporate responsibility, and ultimately write a new chapter in the annals of business history. With a final decisive nod, Musk concluded the meeting. "We move forward with this plan. Let the fund be the symbol of accountability and the turning point that transforms public humiliation into a legacy of bold, ethical leadership." The day of the subsequent hearing dawned gray and tense over San Francisco. Inside the cavernous federal courtroom, every seat was filled with journalists, industry insiders, and members of the public watching live from every available screen. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as Elon Musk, no longer the untouched titan of industry, but a man who had just outlined a radical plan in private meetings, stepped forward once more to address the court. His eyes held a mixture of steeled resolve and a trace of vulnerability, as if every step had brought him closer to reclaiming a part of himself that had long been buried beneath ambition. At the front of the courtroom, behind a long, polished mahogany table, Judge Edward Chen maintained his customary stern presence, though his face remained impassive in public. Those who knew him could see a slight tightening around his jaw, a subtle hint that today's proceedings might force him to confront an outcome he had never anticipated. Before the judge, Musk's legal team stood in silence, their expressions a mix of cautious optimism and nervous tension, fully aware that this moment might redefine not only Musk's future, but also the future of corporate accountability. After the court resumed, Elon Musk rose from his seat. The silence that fell over the room was so complete one could hear a pin drop. For the first few seconds, even the distant hum of the city seemed to pause. Then, in a clear and determined tone, Musk began to speak, his voice resonating throughout the room like a challenge to the established order. "Today, I stand before you not as a man defending accusations with familiar legal rhetoric, but as one who is willing to embrace accountability in a way that redefines what it means to be a responsible corporate leader," he declared, his words, measured and forceful, cut through the tension as he proceeded to detail his groundbreaking proposal. He described his decision to create a compensation fund exceeding $5 billion, $3 billion dedicated directly to recompense aggrieved investors, and an additional $2 billion earmarked for collaborative reforms with the SEC to enhance transparency and rebuild trust. Every word was laced with a blend of conviction and remorse, acknowledging past missteps while heralding a new era of responsibility. For a heartbeat, The courtroom was engulfed in a profound silence, a silence heavy with disbelief, awe, and the recognition that history was being written before their eyes. Across the room, shocked expressions flickered on the faces of attorneys and journalists alike. Their eyes darted between Musk and Judge Chen, capturing every nuance of a man transformed by public humiliation into an unexpected champion of accountability. Even longtime critics, who had expected Musk to retreat into familiar legal appeals, were forced to consider that this bold act of contrition could indeed signal the dawn of a new corporate paradigm. Judge Chen, however, maintained his impassive demeanor, his stoic mask unyielding despite the crack that showed in his eyes, a subtle, all-too-human reaction of astonishment at the audacity of the proposal. For a few long moments, his silence spoke volumes. It was the silence of a man who had expected defiance in response to derision, but now faced a proclamation so uncharacteristic, so profoundly calibrated to induce reform, that even he could not immediately dismiss its implications. The judge's paper, already half-scorched by the laughter during Musk's initial defense, now lay on the bench as a mute witness to the unfolding transformation. In a voice that mixed humility with bold defiance, Musk continued, "I recognize that innovation is built on risk. But true innovation in leadership also requires that we take responsibility for every promise we make, whether those promises spark breakthroughs or at times unintended pain. I offer this fund as a commitment, not only to my investors, but to the very notion that corporations must be stewards of trust, not just engines of profit." The courtroom erupted in a flurry of whispers and murmurs as the magnitude of his words settled over the audience. Cameras captured every moment, the glistening determination in Musk's eyes, the ripples of surprise among his legal team, and the subtle shift even in Judge Chen's carefully controlled posture. Some in the gallery wiped away tears. Others exchanged glances of astonishment, as if witnessing a rare phenomenon, the reawakening of a man who had long been equated with arrogance and unwavering ambition, now laying himself bare in the pursuit of genuine redemption. In that climactic moment of vulnerability and visionary resolve, Musk's statement resonated far beyond the courtroom walls. His announcement was immediately broadcast across the nation, dominating news cycles and social media feeds alike. For those who saw it, Musk was no longer merely the merciless CEO embroiled in scandal. He had become a symbol of the transformative power of humility and responsibility, a reminder that even those who seem invincible can reinvent themselves when the world doubts them the most. As the silence stretched and then gradually gave way to murmurs of approval and cautious optimism, Judge Chen's eyes met Musk's for a split second, a silent acknowledgement that conventional verdicts were being challenged, and perhaps, just perhaps, a new chapter was about to be written in the annals of corporate governance. And in that charged pause between past transgressions and an uncharted future, the seeds of a revolutionary change began to take root. Within hours of Elon Musk's impassioned announcement in the courtroom, an unexpected tide began rolling through America. No longer was his public image defined solely by boardroom bravado and audacious technological triumphs. Today, his bold declaration of accountability, a multi-billion-dollar compensation fund forged in the crucible of humiliation, ignited a genuine emotional awakening among the people. On every major news network and social media platform, video clips of Musk's announcement played in relentless loop. Anchors on television and online pundits alike debated the unprecedented initiative. Here was a man once revered for his fearless innovation, now standing before the nation, not only to defend his record, but to fundamentally redefine what it meant to be a corporate leader. Headlines such as Musk's bold new chapter, and from courtroom humiliation to corporate redemption, splashed across screens, and the narrative began to shift. The story that had once portrayed him as an arrogant titan was gradually being replaced by a portrait of an individual who was willing, despite the sting of public ridicule, to make amends and restore trust. In boardrooms and bustling city cafes, investors who had once been skeptical now looked at Musk's initiative with tears in their eyes. A small investor in a modest hometown brokerage firm recounted, For years, I felt that our trust in these corporations was taken for granted. Today, seeing someone of Musk's stature commit to such a massive fund, it's like witnessing hope in action. I'm not just investing money, I'm investing in the possibility that accountability can become the new standard. Similar sentiments resonated on online forums and social media, where individuals shared personal stories of losing everything in the wake of corporate scandals, only to see this new initiative light a spark of optimism for change. Protesters on the street and advocates for corporate reform united in an emotional outpouring. City squares turned impromptu rallying points as citizens waved banners proclaiming "Accountability now" and "Big mistakes, bold reforms." The unexpected announcement had attracted not only the support of those traditionally disenfranchised by corporate excess, but also of legal scholars, ethicists, and even former executives who believed that this could be the turning point where profit and principle finally intersected. Across online platforms, hashtags like Musk Redemption and Reinvent Responsibility trended for days, celebrating the moment when a mogul's public humiliation transformed into a catalyst for structural change. Within the walls of regulatory bodies, whispers of astonishment were met with cautious optimism. The SEC, long perceived as a bureaucratic force resistant to change, now found itself in a scenario unlike any other. Initial discussions hinted at a new paradigm in corporate governance in which restitution wasn't merely a punitive measure, but a proactive step toward rebuilding public trust. Analysts noted that if Musk's compensation fund and his accompanying promise to overhaul transparency standards succeeded, it could serve as a blueprint for how other large corporations might mend their relationship with the public. In interviews broadcast across national news, former critics of Musk, including once skeptical venture capitalists, admitted that his move challenged preconceived notions of executive accountability. "It's astonishing," one longtime critic commented, her voice thick with emotion, "to see the man who was once unyielding in the face of any question offer something so human, so vulnerable and responsible. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about power, risk, and redemption." The genuine feeling of gratitude among investors was palpable. Many recalled the pain of lost wealth and shattered trust, now mitigated by this unprecedented act of contrition. Emotional scenes unfolded in unexpected quarters. In a modest suburban office, a lone investor wept openly as he scrolled through news updates, the tears of relief mingling with those of long-held sorrow over past losses. Meanwhile, in the bustling corridors of major financial institutions, leaders began to convene emergency meetings, not to strategize defense, but to discuss a future where corporate reform might be more than just a hopeful slogan. The public's response was not monolithic. While a fraction of traditional pundits decried the move as a desperate ploy, the overwhelming tide of opinion cast Musk in a new light, one of radical reinvention and moral resurrection. This groundswell of support was echoed on every level, from the boardroom to the backyards of everyday Americans. The collective sentiment was clear. Despite his previous arrogance, Musk had seized the lowest moment to catalyze a profound transformation. His decision to channel billions into making things right was viewed not as a retreat, but as a courageous act of self-awareness, a declaration that no one, not even a billionaire CEO, was immune to the responsibilities that come with power. As the day drew to a close, and the initial storm of criticism began to settle into reflective conversation, the public narrative shifted inexorably toward redemption. In countless interviews, headlines, and personal testimonials, people began to celebrate this new chapter. A chapter that championed accountability over hubris and compassion over cold calculation. Elon Musk was slowly emerging from the shadow of his humiliation, as not just a survivor of public scorn, but as a symbol of how true strength is forged when one is written off and then chooses to rewrite the rules for everyone's benefit. As the final gavel echoed in the towering San Francisco courtroom, the atmosphere shifted dramatically from a charged silence to an eruption of applause and overwhelmed cheers. Elon Musk, having just delivered his groundbreaking announcement, stood motionless at the podium, soaking in the collective outpouring of emotion from every corner of the room. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. A nation once cynical and dismissive now rose as one in a vibrant ovation for the man who dared to transform humiliation into a vision for radical reform. Stepping down from the witness stand, Musk moved slowly toward the exit. Each deliberate step was captured by the countless cameras arrayed around the courtroom, every lens immortalizing his transformation from the defiant billionaire, once scorned by a judge's derisive laughter, to a leader who had redefined accountability with a multi-billion-dollar compensation fund. His face, once etched with the lines of ruthless ambition, now bore the marks of hard-won humility. The applause, ringing out like a symphony of redemption, washed over him as he walked past rows of stunned onlookers, jurors and reporters, whose questions were silenced by the sheer magnitude of the moment. Outside the courthouse, the energy was palpable. Crowds of passers-by, journalists, and supporters had gathered on the steps, their clapping and cheering mingling with the distant hum of traffic and the cool San Francisco evening air. Musk paused at the threshold, taking a deep breath, as if to collect not only himself, but the hopes of an entire nation. Amid the chaos of flashing cameras and fervent discussions, he allowed himself a solitary moment of introspection, a quiet pause in the midst of an electrified celebration. In that moment alone, on the edge of the courthouse, Elon Musk's inner dialogue unfolded like a private soliloquy. He recalled the dark hours of isolation spent in his opulent high-rise office, where every screen blared ceaseless updates of scornful headlines and merciless memes. Yet now, amid the roaring applause and the tangible weight of collective expectation, he recognized that his journey was far more than a simple legal victory. It was the emergence of a new paradigm in corporate responsibility. Today, he thought, I did not merely defend myself against ridicule. I chose to confront my own mistakes and to make reparations in a way that will alter the very fabric of how businesses operate. I have instituted a fund that is more than financial restitution. It is a commitment to the principle that those who wield power must be accountable to the people they serve. I have turned the sting of public humiliation into a beacon of hope. True strength is not found in evading criticism or clinging to arrogance. It is found in the courage to transform our failures into a legacy of honor. As the crowd's cheers subsided into a sustained buzz, Musk felt the enormity of what he had undertaken settle within him. The compensation fund, $5 billion in total, was more than a financial instrument. It was a symbol of his renewed commitment to ethical leadership and corporate transparency. This initiative, born from personal vulnerability and public disgrace, now shone as a revolutionary model for accountability that could redefine how companies interact with investors and society at large. Surrounded by the sounds of admiration and the vivid realization of a new beginning, Musk slowly made his way toward his waiting car. The media continued to document every gesture, every glance of determination that crossed his face. In the midst of the fervor, key images emerged. Musk, with eyes reflecting both sorrow and newfound resolve, sharing a brief nod with a seasoned journalist, a couple of small investors in the crowd, wiping tears as they clutched printed statements of his announcement, and even a few dissenters softening their tone as they witnessed genuine remorse and desire for positive change in one of the world's most influential figures. Inside the vehicle, as the car rumbled into the cool San Francisco night, Musk glanced out the window. The city lights stretched out like a phosphorescent blueprint of dreams and regrets. He felt a mix of adrenaline and quiet contemplation, emotion long suppressed by the relentless pursuit of profit. In that reflective moment, he whispered to himself, "This is not an end, but the dawn of a new chapter. Today I've redefined victory, not by the absence of defeat, but by my willingness to accept responsibility and forge a better future." Every reflective thought reminded him that he was no longer merely a figure in the headlines for technological triumphs or controversial tweets. He had become a symbol of rebirth, a testament to the truth that even when the world writes you off with ridicule, the courage to change can transform humiliation into the foundation for lasting, meaningful reform. As the car drove away from the courthouse, The roar of the crowd faded into the background, replaced by a steady, determined rhythm of resolve in his heart. Musk looked up at the vast, starry sky above San Francisco, a sky that, like the future, held endless possibility and mystery. In that quiet moment, with the promise of new battles ahead, he knew that true power lay not in resisting criticism, but in assembling the strength to be transformed by it. Ready for the challenges that lay ahead, he embraced the night as both a reminder of past failures and a beacon of his bold, reimagined destiny. Subscribe if you believe that real victory comes not from never falling, but from rising again with honor, and that sometimes redemption is the most empowering legacy of all.